Senator Danielson. Seeing no objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Senator from Black Hawk for Senate File 2236.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Senate File 2236 is a campaign transparency bill brought to us by the Campaign Ethics and Disclosure Board. Periodically, they come to the legislature and ask us to make changes based on their experiences over the last year. And there have been a number of changes in campaign finance. Some related to Citizens United, some related to the ability of other organizations to have dual missions, both campaign speech as well as education. The two most important provisions in the bill that I think are the biggest changes that senators need to be aware of is a provision that under our issue advocacy statute, currently only 527s are required to report to the board. We, in this bill, require 501c4s, c6s, and what's commonly known as super PACs who have a nexus in an Iowa race. So this does not apply to the presidential campaigns. A nexus to an Iowa race as defined in our code. There's also a provision for robocalls or telephone calls in person to have attribution statements. There's been some experience in Iowa recently where those campaign techniques have not been identified, so we look at that. There's a provision that requires restricted donors who help pay for education trips that are legal, but no reporting requirement at present to report to the Ethics and Campaign Disclosure Board so that people are aware of that. There's also a provision for county redistricting record keeping. There's currently no requirement that the internal documents that led up to that decision be kept on record should the decisions that were made end up in a review process. There's currently no requirement to keep those records. And then finally, there's a provision on independent expenditures directly for or against a candidate to disclose all contributions related to that activity. The director has identified a loophole in the current law where we allow for contributions that are not directly related to the communications to be not disclosed, and this is seen as a loophole that has been exploited. You should know all the provisions of this bill apply broadly. So we use the term person because in the Iowa Code that includes all legal entities. Unions, businesses, corporations, nonprofits, etc. So you'll see that reference throughout the chapter, throughout the bill. There are other minor provisions. I'd be happy to answer questions, Mr. President, if there are any.
There are amendments. Senator Shelgren, are you... we'll go to the amendments and then we'll go to you. The first amendment is Senate Amendment 5085, and it's by yourself, Senator Danielson. You are in order.
Mr. President, I would request to divide this amendment.
How do you want to divide it?
I want to divide lines 6 and 7, call that B. The rest of the amendment to be Division A.
The senator asks, and it is divisible, Division A is lines 1 through 5, and then 8 through 13 is Division A. Division B is 6 and 7. Which do you want to take up first? And
Mr. President, as the original author of this amendment, I would request to withdraw Division B.
The senator asks to withdraw Division B. It is withdrawn. We're now on Division A. You are in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment is fairly simple. In the original bill, there's a reporting requirement for gifts to be submitted monthly. In the course of discussing the bill, we decided it would be unnecessary to file those reports if no gifts were given. So the language says you only file them if there was a gift given within that month. That way we're not filing unnecessary paperwork. The reason I had to divide the amendment is because there will be a follow-on amendment that clarifies that because of the disclosure requirements for an attribution statement for radio are in the original bill, as we worked on the bill, we learned that the FCC already requires attribution statements, so we don't need that language in our code. However, there was a drafting error that confused all of those communications in terms of whether they were going to eliminate just radio or all of them. So we had to have a clarifying amendment that said the other ones that are still there on the books remain so. The other change is effective upon enactment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on.
Is there discussion on Amendment 5085 with Division B withdrawn? Seeing none, I think Senator Shelgren wanted to speak on the bill, right? Do you want to speak on this amendment?
No, Mr. President, but I do have an amendment also coming, and so if we'd like to deal with these amendments first, I will ask for either deferral or...
Well, we got another amendment after this amendment?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there further discussion on Division A, which is the amendment? Seeing none, the senator from Black Hawk moves Senate Amendment 5085 to Senate File 2236. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The amendment is adopted. Now we'll call up Senate Amendment 5087, but Senator from Black Hawk, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a result of the adopting the previous amendment, this amendment goes back in and then clarifies that radio advertising is not included in the disclosure provisions in our state law because it's already applicable under FCC, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Is there discussion on Amendment 5087? Seeing none, the senator from Black Hawk moves Amendment 5087. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The motion prevails. The amendment's adopted. Chair recognizes the senator from Wapello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Senator Danielson. We have worked extensively on trying to get this bill clean, as it has 14 different points that it's trying to work on. The last meeting that we had was actually at 12:30 this afternoon. An amendment was requested at that point, and it has not yet shown up, and the person drafting the amendment is not somebody we can locate right now. So I am asking for the patience and asking to defer this bill until tomorrow.
The senator from Wapello asked to defer on Senate File 2236. It is deferred. We'll now call up Senate File 2275. Senator from Black Hawk, Senator Danielson, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. Senate File 2275 is an Internet Poker Consumer Protection Act. It is the result of over a year and a half of thoughtful research and due diligence. The policy before us attempts to address a problem. Today, the policy for Internet poker is to do nothing by default. We neither prohibit it, nor do we regulate it, nor does the federal government. So, over the course of a few years, there has been, for Iowans and for Americans, no real policy related to this issue. I believe we ought to have a thoughtful, responsible policy that protects poker players' rights to have a fair game and a level playing field, whether they play online or in the casino, which is currently legal. Why is it a problem, Mr. President? Well, on the conservative side of the estimates, there is approximately $30 million in Iowa money leaving our state every year, going overseas to who knows where. At the height of poker popularity a few years ago in 08 or 09, that number was estimated to be close to $100 million. That's a problem for our overall economy to see that kind of leakage. It's also generally considered that poker is a sport. It's a game of skill. It has gained broad public acceptance. So it's in its own category when it comes to gaming. We believe that the investment that's been made in Iowa in our 18 land-based / riverboat casinos and our 3 Indian gaming facilities ought to be protected, in addition to the individual player in Iowa. This is in many ways, Mr. President, an e-commerce issue, ones in which we've struggled with on a host of policy areas. The competition between community Main Street businesses and online companies. We still have yet to resolve a thoughtful policy on tax equity. And there are a host of other issues related to e-online commerce. This is another one, which is why we believe we have a thoughtful policy. The bill before us says that individual casinos who are currently licensed by the state of Iowa can partner with a equally qualified licensee, as spelled out in the bill, to provide internet poker only, no other form of gaming online. There are 2 issues that we dealt with that ensure the safety and security of this. The first is the internet provider, the standards that they would use to ensure that the play is fair and there is integrity in the game. There are protocols that industry standards use very widely to ensure that safe game. There's a company in the United States called GLI who has significant business not only in the United States but around the world in this area. They're not the only provider, so there is competition to ensure that the actual game online is fair. The other safety and security issue that we address in the bill is what we call know your customer. In the business community, when you have an online customer, there are protocols that ensure the safe and secure transaction. And not just in gaming, but across businesses who take online transactions, that protocol is often referred to as know your customer. In this case, geolocation, age, who the player is, and etc. So we've considered 2 safeguards that we believe close any loophole about the safety and security of the play. Finally, Mr. President, before we go to amendments, I think this is an issue whose time has come. If not now, it will not go away. We will see continual issues related to online poker, and as many of us on other committees have dealt with, online transactions in general. So we recognize the problem. We've spent considerable time and energy researching it, and at this point in time have a bill before the Senate that we believe is both thoughtful and addresses the issue at hand and doesn't extend into other issues. So there are amendments, Mr. President.
There are amendments. The first amendment is Senate Amendment